Currently, the fifth ruler of the Anasazi, Civ4, known as New Sun, has promised a new era of trade, building roads, delivering resources, and conquering new lands. Let's see if he'll light up a new era or just burn the dinner. A few years have passed, and New Sun I just passed 23 years old. He successfully connected all the cities and resources, and the shipbuilding project was nearing perfection. But just as progress seemed unstoppable, devastating news reached him. His ancestral tribe near the city of Oewima had been massacred by the Spanish, and his mother was among the slain. Overcome with fury, Civ4 declared that in his current state of mind, he was unfit to lead the Anasazi. In my icy mind, I could not find the warmth of their hearts, he said before retreating into isolation for 2 weeks to grapple with his grief and rage. At the age of 31, New Sun met an absurdly tragic end, struck in the head by a stone thrown by the village fool. Yes, you heard that right, a rock. It's hard to fathom that a leader who dreamed of a new world could meet such a farcical fate. This ridiculous incident, however, sparked significant societal changes. Anyone who couldn't count or form coherent sentences was relegated to a lower caste. Officially, slavery didn't exist, but a few hundred individuals essentially became de facto servants. Let's not sugarcoat it. For a time, the Anasazi were leaderless, but after rigorous testing they selected a new ruler, a 23-year-old woman named Roof of the Sky, what sounds, Yázhí Taa. Known for her exceptional patience and delicate craftsmanship, she quickly gained a reputation for her measured judgments. After a year of lawful rule, Yázhí Taa decided to take 3 husbands, one from each city. Unfortunately, the marriage situation wasn't ideal. Sources say it was a tragic period, filled with palace bickering like the capital had never seen before. The leader became a shadow of herself, a bundle of nerves. She was described as turning into a rock, weighed down by worries. Instead of ruling and being with her people, she focused on trying to change legal codes. During one vote, 2 of her husbands from outside the capital cleverly outmaneuvered her, passing a law to open separately managed schools in each city with their own rules. The leader was furious, and the entire legislative system started to crumble due to a lack of trust. Her husbands began making decisions on their own, leaving her with only international affairs to deal with. The queen increasingly slipped away from the capital, avoiding her husbands and royal duties. Reluctantly, she traveled from one leadership school to another, randomly changing the futures in each time she visited. When the city of Pattaya was founded, she made a stop there, and rumors claim she immediately established a leadership school in one of the huts and selected a 1-year-old infant to be the next Zin. It was scandal, but according new rules. She then turned to the small local crowd gathered and asked, "Who will be my husband?" The group stood stunned until a 13-year-old girl named Tasiush, olive bark in Anasazi, stepped forward. To everyone's surprise, the queen accepted her as her 4th husband. For the next 20 years, little changed. Increasingly frequent naval expeditions reached the lands of the Congo and essentially confirmed there was no land suitable for settlement, aside from a small island near Pattaya, which the queen refused to colonize. Everyone grew accustomed to this status quo, and the kingdom thrived, boasting over 700,000 inhabitants and annexing the lands of the tribe from which the great New Sun, the 4th Zin, originated. By the age of 45, Queen Yázhí Taa had calmed considerably, and despite her age, she remained stunningly beautiful. However, she began to speak more and more often of an impending great war on the continent, prompting her to support the construction of defensive walls in every city. At the age of 47, 2 extraordinarily talented boys emerged from the 2 leadership schools. The queen grew deeply fond of one of them and named him her successor, making him the 5th Zin. The boy, only 11 years old, displayed remarkable intelligence in matters of war and politics. He was a natural-born leader, commanding respect with his determination and authoritative voice. His name was Cruising the Ground, which in the Anasazi language was Queen Yázhí Taa. Queen Yázhí Taa assumed power seamlessly at the age of 17, commanding immense respect for his predecessor. His first words as Civ5 were, "The people of this land can be taught our language. The time has come to teach them." It sounded suspiciously like a declaration of war, prompting one advisor to nervously whisper the thought aloud. The king, however, said nothing, his silence louder than any reply. Civ4 Yázhí Taa wasted no time shaking the foundations of his kingdom. He abruptly shifted the scientific focus from irrigation systems to funeral rites, a change that sent a chill through the populace. Whispers spread like wildfire. The young Zin had allied himself with the god of death. For the first time in their history, the Anasazi began constructing battering rams and siege engines. Civ4 Yázhí Taa also dismantled the revered cult of the Chaco Anasazi heralds, an institution dedicated for over a century to peacefully persuading horse tribes to join their nation. When questioned about this controversial move, the king's icy response was, "Now it is time for them to want to learn our language." By royal decree, the Anasazi fleet positioned itself strategically, securing defensive points to ambush ships, navigating the shallows, and launch attacks from the leeward side of the smaller islands. A year later, Civ4 Yázhí Taa had fathered 3 children and gained immense respect throughout the realm. Despite widespread protests, he shut down all leadership schools except the one in the capital. Whispers suggested this was a promise he had made to the late queen. Under his strict control, the school was restructured to focus solely on training future military officers, rather than organizers. For his successor, Civ4 Yázhí Taa selected his wife from Chaco, the same school where he had been raised. Dineshii Benatoij, what means divine being, was his first love, and the only wife from the 4th dynasty who had not borne him a child. At this time, the capital witnessed the emergence of funeral rites and the rise of a belief that those who spoke languages other than Anasazi were the ones taken prematurely from this world. This belief fueled rampant xenophobia and a fierce animosity toward other nations and cultures. The chief deity blamed for unjustly claiming the souls of loved ones was called Oscura Pastor, translated from Spanish as soul collector. Meanwhile, the 2 brothers set to torment the dead bore names rooted in the Russian language: Strakov, the fearful one, and Kalyachka, the thorn. At the age of 22, the king organized grand military maneuvers to prepare his forces for a potential war with the Spanish. However, it quickly became apparent that the troops were terrified by the prospect of battling not just humans, but the so-called demons of the Spanish and Russians. Returning to the capital, the king realized with a heavy heart that his strategy of inciting hatred toward neighboring nations had some glaring flaws, and that another reform was desperately needed. For nearly 8 years, peace prevailed. The neighboring nations feared the Anasazi, and the Anasazi harbored a similar unease toward their neighbors. Amidst this uneasy calm, the Zin's child, born to a mother from Rama, at the tender age of 10 became the living symbol of the cult of the victorious bird, angel of vengeance. Initially, it was not evident that this was a clever fabrication by the king, but the ruse proved extraordinarily effective. Tales of the child's divine power to resurrect the dead swept through the populace, instilling them with a renewed sense of purpose. The boy, named Waihanakwa, victorious bird in the Anasazi language, stood at the center of these developments. Speaking on behalf of his son, the Anasazi king sought to allay his people's fears. To foster a facade of peace, borders were opened with Spain and the Kingdom of Congo. Yet beneath this surface, plans for an invasion quietly advanced. Funds were covertly raised to acquire advanced weaponry, and the training of elite forces was shrouded in secrecy, even from the Anasazi people. Meanwhile, spies were dispatched to Spain to evaluate the state of its military, laying the groundwork for what was to come. Reports from the Spanish capital revealed over 120,000 well-equipped soldiers, which significantly dampened the enthusiasm for a swift attack. However, this report successfully reversed the glorification of the Spanish, and Anasazi national pride reached its peak. Civ4 Yázhí Taa, the 5th Zin of the Anasazi, seized the opportunity presented by the Russians requesting open borders. Boldly, he demanded that the Russians launch an attack on the Spanish. The Russians, however, flatly refused. Undeterred, Civ4 issued a similar demand to the Spanish, requesting that they attack the Russians. The Spaniards, though more polite in their response, also declined. A report from the Russian front revealed some rather shocking details. It turns out the Russians had no copper to speak of, and their army, consisting mostly of subpar archers, barely mustered a force of 90,000. Anasazi strategists allegedly laughed so hard at the news that a new saying was born in the capital, stronger than a Russian bowstring, meaning not strong at all. By the time Civ Yázhí Taa was 27 years old and his son Wahanakwa had reached 13, it became increasingly clear that the Anasazi, Zin had started believing his own propaganda about the burgeoning religion. He began to actively promote the cult and finance the construction of the first kivi, a grand theater of worship dedicated to the religion of the victorious bird. During this period, the reins of military leadership were handed to his beloved wife, General Sali of Chaco, the only one of his wives without children. Known for her sharp mind and unyielding determination, she took charge of the entire army. 3 years later, when the Anasazi officially adopted Baalism as the religion of Wahanakwa, tragedy struck. Queen Sali of Chaco, the beloved wife of the Zin, passed away. The circumstances of her death were heartbreaking, as the Zin himself had encouraged her to take a special remedy recommended by the Russians to boost fertility. It appears, however, that Sali took excessive doses of this concoction, ultimately succumbing to months of debilitating treatment. The Zin, stricken with grief, refused to take another wife from the city of Chaco, a decision that sparked discontent among its residents. One can only imagine the whispered frustrations. First, he takes our finest general, and now he won't even honor our city with another queen. In the wake of this tragedy, the Anasazi nation came together like never before. Sali the Suffering, whose yearning for a child had led to her untimely death, became an almost saintly figure. The cult of longing mothers took root, forever changing the cultural and spiritual landscape of the Anasazi people. Control of the army returned to Zin Civ Yázhí Taa, who began an aggressive expansion of its forces. In a speech to rally his people, he invoked his earlier words, but with a poignant addition. Those who do not know the language and beliefs of the Anasazi should teach them to their children, for if they do not, only Sali, the longing mother, can save them. The proclamation stirred both fear and fervor, blending faith and martial ambition in a way only the Zin could orchestrate. The memory of Sali became a powerful symbol, inspiring both reverence and resolve across the kingdom. At this point, scholars mark the end of the Copper Era for the Anasazi people. Zin Civ Yázhí Taa, now 32 years old, presides over a population of 1.3 million, supported by an army of 140,000 soldiers, making it the third largest military force in the world at the time. If you enjoyed this episode, I kindly ask for a like and a subscription. It means a lot to me, especially since this is such a niche topic and you stayed with me all the way to the end. Thank you so much. I'm just as curious as you are to see what happens next.